Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 200th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's discussion begins, I'm started on the wrong paragraph. Today our panel will discuss the phenomena of the woke movement. What is it? Why does it exist? What kind of an impact is it having on our culture? And how does it affect our elections? Today's panel begins with Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&D Financial Services, then Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, Joe Gaines, former faculty member of the University of Akron and Wadsworth High School, and Patty Haskins, former member of Wadsworth City Council and also the faculty of Wadsworth High School. Bryan, ever since the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the so-called war on poverty, there have been efforts on the part of Americans to downplay their positive impacts on society. In the last 10 to 12 years, those efforts have been drastically increased. And what do we make of all this?
Well, I would like to start out with a quote by someone that's been in the news lately, Elon Musk. You know, he was the hero of the woke crowd because of Tesla and the electric cars and everything. Now he's the enemy because he's gone out and he's in the process of taking Twitter private. You know, we've heard all about this, and it's the double standard. You know, when people would complain about Twitter, pretty much conservatives would complain about Twitter and shadow banning and throttling accounts and basically, you know, deplatforming people. The answer was always, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want. Now it is going to be a private company, and the woke crowd does not like that. And Elon Musk has said about woke, and I want to quote this. It's been fact checked, and Snopes, everybody has said this is actually a quote from Elon Musk. He says, wokeness gives people a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue. And I think that really encapsulates what wokeness is. I've always thought of wokeness as this just extension of political correctness. You can't keep up with what you're supposed to put in your banner on Twitter and on Facebook and everything. A couple of weeks ago, it was the Ukrainian flag. You had to have the Ukrainian flag or you weren't woke, you know. Whatever weekly problem came up that the woke crowd, these groups, these roving bands of woke people on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, you know, it was the LGBTQ. If you didn't have their flag in your banner, you weren't woke. Okay, you were not up with the latest problem, the latest you know, issue that the majority or those people that are conservative are foisting on us. Now, with the leak of the Supreme Court draft, just the last day or so, it's a hanger. You have to have a hanger in your banner, or you're just not woke enough to what the conservatives are doing to women. So, you know, for me, I really believe in the definition that Elon Musk has said. It's a way for people to be mean and cruel to people. It stifles any sort of discussion. We would not be having this discussion.
Bryan, before you get too much further, tell me, what is a hanger?
A clothes hanger. A clothes hanger.
What does that mean?
Basically, it refers to women having to go back in the early days of abortion and to use a hanger to abort a baby.
Okay.
That's the latest woke symbol that needs to show up in your header on social media, because that shows that you're woke and that you're with them. Okay. Last week or so, it was the Ukrainian flag. If you didn't have the Ukrainian flag, you weren't woke. You were not up on the latest virtue signal that's out there that the woke crowd, you know, basically, and everybody's kind of wondering, like, where are these people at? Where is this group of people that consider them so, that consider themselves so up on all the injustices that are foisted upon the minorities and upon people, upon the oppressed. Where are they? But it gets traction. And, like I said before, it was the LGBTQ. You had to have certain things in your banner. You had to have your pronouns in your biography. He, she, they, them, all that kind of stuff. Or you were not woke. And I'll just say that we would not be having this conversation if we were all woke, because we would just, you can't disagree with the woke crowd. You can't. They cancel you. People talk about, oh, that doesn't really happen. Well, it does happen. People get basically canceled out of social media. And, it's got to stop. We have to be able to have discourse. We have to be able to disagree or even agree to disagree with each other, and move on with our lives. This has basically been sort of something that social media has created with certain individuals that have to be on the leading edge of anything that is viewed as something oppressive to the minority, whoever that minority is, whether it's women, LGBTQ, whether it's, whatever. Another one was, the gay bill. That was a woke terminology that took off, and you had to have that in your header too. Don't say gay, don't say gay. So it really does stifle any sort of real conversation. And, for us folks, I'm not that worried about being woke. I get up pretty early in the morning, so I'm woke early. But I just don't go along with the latest trend as far as what they say you have to do to be considered woke. So that's my take on it.
Well, it just might pass into the history books. Ron, what's your thought?
I have to admit to being, at least in the last 20 some years, living a relatively sheltered existence. So I'm unaware of the terminology here, really. I hadn't really heard very much about this. An occasional use of it in a pejorative manner, much to the way snowflake was used as conservatives complaining about liberals. But I'm wondering, I'm reminded of a quote by Barry Goldwater, I believe it was, who said that, what did he say? Passion in defense in defense of liberty is no vice, not passion. But so I think I can't see anything wrong with being militantly opposed to injustice as we see it. That I think that's in my case, I find it almost a moral right to speak out against these things. I agree that I can see that certain, one good example of this is Black Lives Matter movement, where I think it's probably some evidence that's been taken over by folks for profit and trying to make a thing of it. That doesn't take away from the worth of the movement of the whole thing. So, Bryan, I like your comments about, okay, I don't mind about being woke or whatever, that try to be aware of what's going on and try to stand up for your own rights, what's happening. I've been canceled by folks on the right. Basically, people who have dropped associations with me because of my stances. So it works on both sides, in both ways. And certainly there's lots of opportunities for liberals and the Democratic political parties of doing things which are extreme in that right. That's an extremism in defense of liberty. That was the quote. So I see that it's it looks like it's a problem. Again, I don't care. I'm going to keep supporting those things that that I feel strongly about. And I'll repost something on social media or make my own comments if I feel that I agree with it. And not because it's a bandwagon issue, but because that's what I agree with.
Yes, but Ron, you're not going to shut down discussion on a topic you disagree with.
No. In fact, I try to invite it.
Yes,
Invite it. It doesn't usually work, but
to Brian's point, though, people who are woke will not tolerate disagreement.
well, I haven't really experienced that.
I mean, they're called names. In fact, Biden just yesterday referred to the MAGA crowd, and the next thing you know, they're going to be coming after your children, he said. Of course, he said that, at one point, several months ago, maybe during the campaign, his campaign, he said, "I give you my word as a Biden." Well, I think he did that yesterday too. And anyway, pardon the interruption, Ron.
Yeah, I read that. And Joe Biden gets a little loose-lipped sometimes. He's not quite as circumspect as you expect of a good politician. So, but in some ways, that's his charm for many of us. So, I both agree and disagree with Bryan, and I think that's been true pretty much in this relationship we've had here. And we agree to disagree, and I don't get upset with him just because he's wrong. I don't get upset with him.
Well, all you have to do is read his sweatshirt, and you know that civility matters.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's also right there.
Okay. Joe, you're up. What are your thoughts?
Well, I looked at this topic and I didn't really understand it at first either. Then I did a little research and talked to my wife about it, and it's more of a knee-jerk label. It's labelism. You're labeling things, and I think that's wrong. I think it becomes a problem because it's too easy to do. When you label things like conservative, liberal, so on, you stop the ability to think. You stop the ability to really get involved. You stop the ability to discuss things.
Good point.
And we need to do that. We need to do that more now than ever. And a lot of the guys have been talking, like Ron and Ryan both have kind of hit on that, and I think that's a big problem. There's injustices that are occurring. We can't neglect those, and we can't just label it.
Sorry, Joe. What's occurring? I missed that.
Injustice.
Oh, injustice. Okay.
Racism and so on.
Yeah.
But we can't just ignore it. We've got to solve it.
Well, will we ever be able to admit that it's been solved?
No.
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not politically. Like there's a term here that you used, the war on poverty, so-called war on poverty. Why is it called so-called?
Well, the poverty rate hasn't changed at all in 50 years. That's why
Well, we haven't been winning the war.
That's true. The war on poverty has been a loser.
Yeah.
Not near as I can tell. Yeah.
But see, that's your opinion. And I like that opinion because I can agree with it or disagree with it. But I'm not going to label it and say, well, it's just I'm
just going to publish poverty rates. They're about the same as they were.
Right.
60, yeah. But, Patty, you look like you're about ready to jump all over Bryan.
Never would I do that. When we discuss woke, we have to recognize the fact that the term woke has attained a negative connotation, that when you say this, it is a slur towards someone. When I think of woke, I think of people that are concerned about social issues, that they are concerned about helping the poor. They are concerned about occurring racism, about anti-Semitism, that they are that they are interested in climate change. They are interested in social issues that will make, in my opinion, a better country. And if that is part of the definition of woke, I have to admit to being woke. Unfortunately, what's happened is that there are those that have taken that definition of woke and they have expanded it. And they've expanded it to the point, unfortunately, where they are associating anyone that takes any type of social issue to the extreme, and they are labeling anyone that has any concern about any of these social issues to be part of that extreme. And I don't think that that's the case. You know, for example, any Democrat right now is called the woke liberal, and it's meant in a negative manner. So you are associating what my views are, what Ron's are, what Bryan's are, what any of ours are, with that extreme part of our party, and making it impossible to discuss issues. You know, Bryan, you talked about having discussion and being, and you know, Joe mentioned this, Ron mentioned this. At the present time, as soon as you mention a social issue, if you say that racism does occur and you'd like to discuss it, you are shut down as being woke by those. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that that's all of a particular party that's doing that. Where I see this is the extremists on the Republican side that are making issues where issues did not exist. There are present Republican leaders that are claiming that all Democrats are woke, that all Democrats are pedophiles. There are members of the party, QAnon followers, for example, that believe all kinds of crazy things. You know, not only do they believe in this, that the election was stolen, but they believe that all Democrats are lizard people, that we eat children's blood. Now, am I to assume that because the QAnon portion of the party feels that way, that that's the way all conservatives and all Republicans feel? No, I'm not. And for the same reason, I cannot assume that all Democrats feel the same way as those on the fringes of the party, which is what is always being talked about. Those fringe elements in the party that have taken good, reasonable causes that they would like to discuss, and they've taken them to the extreme. Now, you mentioned in your opening the effect that this has on politics. You know, right now, the politics and the political forum is being driven by these woke issues. Very honestly, I don't think those are the issues that the average voter is going to be concerned about come November, or was concerned about in May. You know, to me right now, the biggest issues that concern everyday people are inflation and the economy. And those are and you know, the price of gas, the price I'm going to the grocery store when I leave here today, the price that I'm going to have to pay for my groceries. Those are the issues that we need to be discussing right now and looking for solutions. And the only way to do that is if both parties get together and come up with solutions for those situations. And that will never be accomplished if we are too busy calling each other terms woke that tend to be negative and refusing to have discussions. So
I would like to, if I could add, and I agree with those last points with Patty. I agree on those things. What has happened though in this movement of wokeism is if you don't agree 100% with them, you are labeled either a racist, a bigot, a misogynist, a transphobe, you name it. They label you and they don't want to talk with you about it. Now, I might have a disagreement about climate change. I'm not a denier.
No.
I'm not a denier about that. I might have a disagreement with someone about what should be taught in the schools. I'm not transphobic. I'm not homophobic. I'm not, you know, I'm just, but that's the problem that we get into, is that a label is attached, and then, you know, you're a bigot. And if you don't agree 100% with the 1619 Project about how slavery drove this country and about reparations, you are a racist. Okay. And I think
I agree with you totally on that,
Yeah.
Brian.
I think there are people on both sides of the aisle that'll say, wait a second, you know, we can't just start rewriting history here. But that's the problem with the woke crowd and these extremists, you know. And poor Hillary, she still hasn't accepted the outcome of the election. Russia, I mean, she just said it the other day. Now, we can talk about that all day, but I'm not going to shut Patty down and throw her in the corner and label her some sort of denier or some sort of conspiracy kook or anything like that. We can have that discussion. Wokeism doesn't allow that. That's the problem.
But it depends upon who you label as wokeism. And you talk about labels and calling others racist. And you're right, that is so totally wrong. Just because you disagree with the situation or don't agree with this 1619 Project doesn't make you a racist. But just because as soon as I mention that there are racial issues, or that we need prison reform, or that, we need to look at climate change, there are too many outspoken people that are labeling that woke and shutting that conversation down. Brian, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't make that claim to me and say, oh, I'm not even going to discuss this with you. But unfortunately, all of the air is being filled by pundits and by politicians who are taking these issues from the extreme left and right and putting them in the forefront for the news cycle, trying to impress upon everyone that this is the way the majority of the country is. And it's not the way the majority of the country is.
I can agree with that.
I like the idea of what Eric Holder, who was a Black attorney general reporting to a Black president, described us as a nation of cowards because we're unwilling to sit down and have an honest discussion about some of these issues. We will not talk about the effect on the Black community of the high school dropout rate, or of the 72% of Black children being born out of wedlock. We have an adult population of Blacks now that didn't know a father in the home. We should have an honest discussion that would include those things. Black failure is not totally a function of white racism. There are all these other things that are involved.
Somebody's commented that so many of the ills of society, be the abortion rate or in the particularly Black communities, it's more a function of poverty than anything else.
And where does the poverty come from?
And where does the poverty come from? There are social inequities and
well, there are also
things here, dropout rates and all that stuff.
Yeah,
that all happens, but we don't talk about it.
There are responsibilities that people have for their own lives. Sure. And if you're a minority, we tend to deny that and say it's all because of white racism.
Right.
All the failures of the Black community can be traced back to slavery. Well, that's not true. More than half of the Black population of the United States right now can't trace their ancestry back to slave times, and most of them were their ancestors emigrated here after the Civil War. But there are things that need to be talked about openly and honestly. Like Bryan indicated, that we're just going to label anybody that disagrees with us, and that we make no progress that way.
Yeah.
Interesting side comment, John. I read just recently that both Harvard and Georgetown universities are trying to make some reparations. Because of much of their wealth was built on slave labor. But they're having trouble finding people to to give the money to. Again, as you say, because so many don't really have a good handle on their past history. They don't know where their ancestors came from. I don't know where most of my ancestors came from, for that matter. So
I don't either. The name Grom means thunder in Russian. And I know that my grandfather, Grom, died when he was 44, and that is all I know about him, and absolutely nothing about his ancestors. So
You know, one of the things, and let me just throw out a name, if you really want to read something good, I mean, Thomas Sowell has written extensively on these issues. I mean, he is a very well-regarded economist. His arguments are reasoned, but because he's not considered Black enough and woke enough, his opinions get thrown, and they're laden with data. I mean, he talks about this issue about when the father was taken out of the home, and he compares it to the 30s and the 40s and the early 50s, and when there were a mother and a father and the Black households. He was raised by a single mom, you know, with his grandma and grandpa. He had a nuclear family, but because he doesn't go along with the latest narrative that it's the suppression and all that kind of stuff. He's not woke. He's canceled. Nobody will listen to him on the left.
What was the name again, John?
His name is Thomas Sowell, Sowell. His books are out there. I mean,
36 of
what's that?
He has written 36 books.
Right.
And he is not considered enough of an expert to be on CNN.
Right. Exactly. Because he doesn't go along with the narrative that the woke crowd has put out there when it comes to Black poverty and all those types of issues. And he touches on a lot of different things, and it's very well reasoned, but you know,
well,
nobody's going to read him.
That's it for this week. Our 27 minutes is up, and I'd like to continue this conversation on our next program 2 weeks from today. So thank you very much, people. See you in 2 weeks.
Take care.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.